Let's talk about it.
Hello and welcome back to Thicc Radio, the podcast where we talk about gaming and everything in its orbit. I'm James.
And I'm Tim, so let's get into it.
Oh, Tim.
Yes.
Timbo.
Yes.
Timbolina.
Do you know how many people do that with my name? I've been called Timbo, you called me Timbolina, some people call me Tim Timony. It's like, what?
Tim Timony, Tim Timony, Tim Taroo.
Timberly, I've been called Timberly before.
Timberly.
Yeah.
Timberly. My name is Timberly, and my twin is Kimberly.
Do you see why I don't like my name?
I love it. No, the thing is, right, James. The only thing I rhyme with is games. So James likes to play games. And I can't do anything else with that. Because every other iteration of my name, which is Jim, makes me feel viscerally angry.
You don't like being called Jim?
I fucking hate it. I don't have an anger problem or a physical assault charge against my name, but I swear to God, if someone at a nightclub was like, "Hey Jimmy, how the fuck are you?" I would take out his front teeth. I don't know what it is. It just ooh, Jim,
What about
Jimmy, Jimbo, Jamesy.
What about Jiminy?
Jiminy?
Yeah.
Jiminy John Julash.
You can be Jiminy and I can be Timony.
Okay. Do you know what? You want to know something, bitch?
What?
Game on.
Okay.
Timony and Jiminy coming down the chimney.
You can be Jiminy the cricket and I'll be Timony the cockroach. No, but not like the regular cockroach, like the Madagascar hissing cockroach that sometimes gets bejeweled because people are bougie.
Yes, you're living on an old bitch's lapel, just waiting for her to drop, and you can $10. The two faggoty insectoids coming down the runway, ready to steal your lunch. I don't know what we're doing. Jiminy Cricket and Timony Cockroach. Oh, fucking hell.
Well, it's either that or, I've also been called Tiny Tim, although obviously not anymore, but when I was a kid, I was. Or just Timmy. Timmy is probably the most popular one.
Oh, okay, so I once went to an underwear party, and I had a very old man truly trying to finger me, at the bar, slurring into my ear, "I guess that's why they called the movie James and the Giant Peach."
Oh.
And I was like, no!
Oh, God, that made my insides clench.
You telling me, especially because I think he was determined to get to the black pips on the inside of the peach.
Oh.
It was very uncomfortable.
I wish I could say that that's never happened to me, but...
You had a man trying to fish the shit out of your asshole, Tim.
Well, no, God, no. Oh, vulgar. But, and rude. But no, when I worn a kilt, I wish that I could say that nobody's ever stuck their hand up it, but unfortunately they have.
Yeah, gay men in kilts, it does seem like just a fetish invitation to a lot of them.
It's not an invitation to start fondling my junk. Come on. Would you just walk up to well, see, this is the problem that I have with going to certain gay venues. Yeah, there are people who have zero fucks about grabbing someone's crotch.
I feel like in gay venues we need to have a little bit more of that. So, now that you mentioned kilts, I figure today is a good opportunity for us to talk about clothing. And when I say clothing, I do mean more specifically that construct of fetish clothing. Fabrics that people tend to obsess over in ours and various fetish communities. I suppose, can we discuss, first of all, just some common and perhaps less common fabrics that kinksters love for listeners who might not be aware? Because, when I think of fabric, and obviously we've done an episode on leather, but leather.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I would then consider pleather to be a fetish material.
Well, pleather if you can't afford the real thing. And I do have some faux leather pieces just because it's expensive.
Yes, very true. But then, I also think of things like rubber and silicone, which, well, actually, no, silicone not really as a material or a fabric, maybe more latex. That's the one I
Yeah,
involved.
there are some bodysuits that are made out of silicone instead of latex because you can get more detail with silicone.
Ah, well, that makes sense because liquid latex, latex is hard to cut. You would have to pour it over a mold, is my understanding. So there's not much give to
You
latex.
you can cut latex and it can be glued together with rubber cement, but that's not the general way to do it. Like you really want it in one piece just
Yeah.
because of it's just easier to do that way and less chance of it tearing open at the seam. But there are some latex pieces that are done with seams. It all depends.
Okay, and then the other fabric that really comes to mind, and maybe this is a newer one that people are using, is neoprene, which is
Yeah, I do love me some neoprene.
which is more typical. Like, and I feel like we could probably go through each of these as one, right? So, like neoprene for listeners, if I was to describe neoprene, if you've never held it or had it before, it's probably closer to like a malleable foam. I think in terms of texture, not maybe in
It's
terms of actual chemical makeup.
Yeah, it's the exact same stuff that a wetsuit is made out of. For like, if you're going scuba diving, you're in a neoprene wetsuit.
Hmm. Like a pup hood. Typically,
Yeah.
pup hoods are made of neoprene. And
Hmm.
tends to be like, because of that shaping and the material, it tends to be more that padded texture and a little bit comfy.
Yeah, it's much more pliable than
Hmm.
leather is. Now, leather can become very supple if you moisturize it, if you wear it often, it'll absorb your body oil. It will get soft and very malleable, but or malleable, sorry. But neoprene is by far a lot more versatile in like ease of comfort, and you can usually wear it straight away.
Although, I feel like somebody on Drag Race, do you know what? And I'm remembering this now. It was Widow Von Du, season 12. They were doing some kind of runway first episode.
The fall and the spring and fall
Fall
looks.
runway.
Yeah.
That's right. Widow Von Du wore some kind of neon outfit. I think it was for spring, and it was a
Mhm.
neoprene outfit. And there was one element to it, and I distinctly remember this from the judges. They were like, it was bent because it was the way that it must have been folded and packed.
Yeah.
This element must have been bent, and because it was pressed in that way, it had a permanent foldy, flappy bit in it, which obviously she was trying to like swish and sway and like
Mhm.
distract from, but it retained
The crease.
the crease. And I don't
Yeah.
know with neoprene if you can fix that
You
yourself.
can. You
Oh, you
can.
can.
You have to stretch it over something. So like when you buy, say if you're a puppy and you buy a neoprene pup hood, it's going to come in the mail. There are parts of it that are going to be creased and bent. That's just how it works because it's got to be shoved into a box. If you get one of those styrofoam mannequin heads, that are I don't even think they're $1, honestly. Just go and get one of those, take your pup hood and put it over that and make sure that that crease is stretching. It will go away. It's
Okay.
going to take time, but it will go away.
Okay. I mean, I don't necessarily think we need to spend too much time discussing leather. I think if people really want to hear us go deep into leather, they can tune into our leather episode that was available in
Yeah.
season one. But we were talking a bit on latex before that. What do you think people need to know about latex? Like, when would you typically come across latex? Typically speaking, in the fetish world.
To find it for purchase, you would probably have to go to a convention of some kind where they have a vendor that specifically deals with latex, or you can order it online. Now, the thing that I caution about ordering latex online is you have to know the quality of it. You have to know the thickness of it, the quality, and it's going to run you a pretty penny. Like I want more latex pieces, and it's as expensive as leather because a lot of time goes into creating these pieces, especially a full bodysuit.
Hmm.
So know the thickness of it. You definitely want it to be not so thick that you can't move in it, but you want it to be thick so that it doesn't have the possibility of tearing. Because honestly, like there are ways of fixing latex. It just depends on where it's torn. If it's torn in a certain area, it's junk. There's nothing you can do with it.
Hmm.
You have to keep it out of sunlight because sunlight will break down latex. You want to keep it away from any oils because like body oil obviously is going to degrade the latex at some point, but not as quickly as like, oh, I don't know when you'd ever have the opportunity to spill cooking oil on it, but that will break down latex. Um,
This is where the thing about baby powder comes in, right?
Oh, well, you could baby powder yourself, but truthfully, oh, you're talking about on the latex itself. Yes. When you're not wearing it, you want to have it washed and then you want to powder it. You can even use flour if you have nothing else. Just you don't want the latex sticking to itself. And to get in and out, well, to get into it, you have to lube yourself up, especially if you're a hairy person. Like trying to put that stuff on raw it's going to be very uncomfortable. So just lube yourself up really well. You can use a water-based lubricant and then slip yourself into it.
Then rubber. So rubber to
That's
me,
the same thing.
yeah, is a similar concept. Rubber, I don't know. I feel like rubber would be the one I would have the most apprehension of because I feel like I'm the type of person who has like pockets of hair in places where I don't think about my hair being like on the tips of my shoulders or on like the curvature of my back, where like trying to yank something down over my head, I don't exactly want to have like an unplanned waxing session to happen,
Yeah.
you know? So what's unique to the rubber situation to latex?
Well, well, it's the same thing as what I was saying. Rubber and latex are the same thing. So like if you're talking about rubber, you're talking about latex because they come from the same tree. So
Oh, do they?
yeah.
I thought latex was like a custom thing that someone had created. I thought that latex and rubber were different.
No, they're the same thing. No,
Oh.
you might be thinking of, I'm not sure what you're thinking of, honestly. Like silicone has to be custom made, it has to be custom molded, but it can it's more versatile in small details. Like silicone can have, how can I articulate this? Like if you wanted, say, okay, so say like if you wanted a bodysuit made out of silicone rather than latex, you could have embellishments, you could have details, you could have scaling, you could have gills, you could have basically anything you want because it will hold its shape, whereas latex conforms to your shape.
I think my confusion is more so that, like, prior to you saying that they're the same thing, I had no concept of that. Because I feel like
Oh,
I've
okay.
seen fetishists online, describing themselves as, like, a rubber boy and a rubber obsessor. And I've seen people describe themselves similarly with latex. So I think if you were like, latex, rubber, leather, blah, blah, to my mind, it's like, oh, well, they're different things.
I
They
mean, I could be wrong about this, but I am fairly certain that there is no distinction between latex and rubber. It is the same damn thing, and that
Google it. Is latex and rubber the same thing? Rubber and latex are not the same thing, but many
oh,
people use the words as if they are the same. Latex is the milky white sap of rubber trees, which is found beneath the bark of a mature rubber tree. Oh, so they come from the same place.
yeah. I said they came from the same tree. I just didn't know that there was a distinction
Oh.
in.
Well, there you go. So it's like latex is to rubber as ham is to bacon.
There you go.
Okay. Jinx. Um, well, that leaves us then with lycra.
Yeah.
So lycra, it's like typically I think that's things like wrestling singlets,
Mhm.
speedos, like sportswear type of
Yeah.
thing. It's
Spandex.
spandex. It's meant to be very like moisture wicking, contorts to the body. Ja, 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 ja. I love me a bit of lycra. I won't lie. I don't know if I would say I've got a particular like lycra love.
Mhm.
Lycra virgin.
Well, Lycra is the most accessible. Like if you are on a budget, Lycra is your friend because it's usually the cheapest. You know, you can get a wrestling singlet for probably $20.
You can get it for girl. I got mine for 10. I got mine for £10 on Amazon.
Okay, well there you go. Yeah, it is. It's the most cost-effective fetish gear.
Hmm.
And it's also extremely versatile in the way that, if you're a seamstress or seamster, I don't know why I'm gendering this. I'm sorry. But if you are good with sewing, that's how I should have said it. it's pretty easy to work with, and you can create a lot of things out of Lycra. If you just want to purchase it, they have Lycra everything. Any article of clothing they can make out of Lycra.
Oh, I just googled this. So apparently, seamster is the male counterpart to seamstress, but the gender-neutral term is tailor.
Tailor.
If
See,
you're
this is me being a bad progressive. I should have just said Taylor.
if you're a talented tailor, darling, my attention Taylor T.
I apologize if trying to gender that triggered anybody. I'm still working on it.
Well, I wouldn't say it's not necessarily a possibility, but I think the context we would assume the term seamstress is like Drag Race. When
Yeah.
the fuck else in common parlance are people like, ooh, girl, did you sew that, bitch? Ooh, ready for the work day? Like, no, like, it's Drag Race. So seamstress is the go-to term. So I don't think the presumption of seamstress is unreasonable.
Yeah.
But there you go. If people are wanting to be gender conscious, a tailor, Tailor, bam. And I mean, when I kind of rattled off some of those fabric ideas before, like that was just me thinking about like, oh, these are the ones I know of. Are there any like fetish fabrics in particular that you can think of?
Well, I'm partial to a bit of mesh myself. I like mesh because it's a bit, or anything that's see-through, transparent. Anything that kind of shows off a particular part of your body. I have a mesh short sleeve hoodie that I like to use as part
Oh.
of my, and I also have a mesh tank top that I've severely outgrown, but
Mm.
I like putting it on anyway, just to be like, hey, look at how fat I've become, because this obviously doesn't fit anymore.
I mean, mesh is cute, and obviously it's got its sort of link with that sort of typical, uh, s- the word it's not stockings. What am I? Not pantyhose. What am I thinking of? Mesh leggings that the ladies wear.
Fishnets.
Fishnets, them's the ones.
Yeah.
So fishnets are the mesh tank tops of the leggies. Um, Here's a question for you. I have a bare tank top that it's the same material as like those basketball t-shirts. Would
Oh
you
yeah, yeah.
consider that as mesh? Because it's technically thin material with lots of little holes in it.
Yeah, anything meant to be that breathable, I suppose you would say, is mesh.
There you go. So, I mean, bit of mesh. And I wouldn't have thought mesh as a material, because I suppose in my brain I would term mesh as like a design of material. But it creates a texture feel regardless. So,
Yeah.
mesh makes sense. What else? I'm sure there are other things I'm not thinking of.
I mean, kilts are very popular as a fetish article of clothing, and they can be made out of damn near anything. I mean, they can be made of neoprene, they can be made of leather, they can be made of latex, they can be made of just regular fabric. You don't see a whole lot of traditional tartan in fetish kilts, though.
But
It
imagine.
tends, like, you might have a like a tartan patch in between the pleats, but it's usually kind of a utilitarian black or brown or something like that.
Yeah, to be fair, we're talking about all these really sexy fetish materials. If you wore a tartan kilt, you're trying to sexualize wool. Like,
They're
that is.
also, most fetish kilts are not made of wool. They're usually just made of some heavy fabric.
No, but you want to know what is made of wool? Nana's cross knit sweater that she made you for Christmas. I'm not wearing that to the club, girl. Oh.
I had a leather kilt and I outgrew it, and I'm so disappointed by that.
Oh.
That was so expensive, and there's no way. I mean, I suppose I could have taken it to a leather worker to put more panels into it, but I feel like that would have made it look asymmetrical, and it was just easier to sell it.
You could have taken it to an upholsterer.
You
had it, had it turned
can
in.
reupholster this for me.
And if it's not going to work, you could have it turned into a settee. Oh,
I'm getting very close to outgrowing two of the leather vests that I own, and they don't even zip up. They're just meant to go over and be open. But so one of my friends that's a feeder has a leather vest that has the colors of the fat pride flag on it, and I want to do that too.
that'd be hot. Little Daddy Neapolitan. Hot little waddling about like, you boys want to come and taste of Daddy's ice cream? Oh yeah, come and get it. Yeah. No, when I was thinking When I was thinking of like the joke of Nana making like a wool sweater for Christmas, I thought like I'd love to be the grandparent who like does that, where it's like I'm doing cross stitch, I'm doing knitting, but it's like a cross stitch of like a massive cock, you know, or like my young gay grandson is gonna go out to the club for the first time, so of course I've made him a nice knit wool sweater. That has like the hanky code like stitched into the back or something. I think that would be absolutely fabulous, and I think if there's any senior generians out there who'd like to invest in that, please reach out to us at thethiccradio@gmail.com. I'd be very interested to hear from you.
I was going to add that jock straps are also a pretty common and popular
Yeah.
piece of fetish gear.
Because I think we're starting in that conversation wise, like moving away from fabric necessarily.
Oh, that's yeah.
Well, you know, like moving into more specific items. So, like kilts, jock straps, you know, crop tops.
Mm.
It's a moment, it's a vibe. Harnesses.
Oh, I love me a harness. I've got so many of them now.
Harnesses, hoods, gimp masks. So, okay, here's a question for you. What is the difference between a harness and a yarnus?
Oh, I think a yarnus is if it's made out of rope or some other woven material, because that's growing in popularity as well. Again, is probably a cheaper alternative to a traditional leather harness, and also because it's a little more artistic.
I've got you. So it's more like people do that thing where it's like running down the arms or like the sides. It's more like a sort of nod to maybe like the sort of rope tying fetish in a sense.
Yeah, because my friend that lives in
Rope.
Detroit is really into rope and rope
Rope.
play and huh?
That's a fabric.
Oh,
Maybe
rope, yeah, nylon.
nylon. There you go. That's another fabric, bitch. Hmm.
You don't find too much stuff made out of nylon that isn't rope, though.
No, and I suppose like when I think about like when I was a kid and playing with rope and like it would fray at the end and like you know you run your finger over it, like it's not a very pleasant material in and of itself. It is basically just plastic.
And it can be very itchy when worn. Like I wore a rope harness that a friend of mine made, and it wasn't the most comfortable thing to wear. Like it certainly like it was roomy and it was comfortable on like as far as fit, but to feel that rubbing against your skin was not the most pleasant feeling.
Now, did I ever tell you the story about the rope daddy?
I don't know. I
See,
don't think so.
I will tell you this, right? Because, and listeners, please listen closely to this. This is the best sexual experience I've ever had. Period. Okay. I had invited this gentleman around, and I was living at student accommodation at the time, alright? And this man must have been mid to late 40s, but he was beautiful. You know when a man is like, he's not muscly. He was very thin, not to say sinewy, but he had like thin man musculature that was sexy in a strong way for someone who was very thin and lithe.
Oh, so like a swimmer's build.
Yeah, like I don't really know how else to describe it, but there you go. So like a swimmer's body, very handsome in the face, salt and pepper with more salt and pepper, but he's very very handsome. And he'd brought rope, and he told me he was bringing rope, and he did say there's no obligation to use this, just if you would like to. And I was like, okay, you know. And it was wonderful. We were sat in my room. He was on the bed, and he explained to me like how the rope stuff is meant to work. He's like, I really enjoy this. If you don't feel comfortable, we won't do this. But if you'll humor me, let me talk you through it. I was like, okay. And he explained to me what he would do in order to rope tie me. And he even demonstrated with some simple ties to start, like just binding my hands and feet so I couldn't move, and then showed me how to shift myself so that he could remove the brace. I was mystified by it, you know what I mean? Like when you're a kid and you see like those puzzle magicians on how they like have themselves in the fucking like the mental like
The straight jacket.
straight jacket, they get themselves out and I was like, how the fuck do they do that? I was locked into this thing and he's like, twist your hands literally 90 degrees and the whole thing slips off. That was fucking mind blowing to me. But we did it. He got me to strip down. He rope tied me so that I could not move. And he fucked me. And when I tell you, it was the most intense feeling because he wasn't laying on top of me, so to say. I was on my back, obvi. He was in me, obvi. And because of the pressure of the ropes, obviously I was feeling very like not constricted in a way that felt uncomfortable, but just like contained and held
Cradled. You were
weirdly.
cradled.
Yeah, it was just, it felt incredible. And it was a very intense feeling for a moment. And then he said, "Look at me, boy." And somehow, like, in that moment, I understood what being a sub truly meant because I looked at his eyes and, like, I might have let him in an extra 4 or 5 inches because Jesus Christ, like, something just came over me where I was like, whoa.
That's the power of the Dom, I'm telling you.
Oh my God. And, like, afterwards, he took it off me. We cuddled for hours. And I never heard from him again.
That's a shame. But I'm very happy to hear that he cuddled with you because that means he understood aftercare.
It's one of those experiences where, like, I must have only been 19, 20 at the time. I'm 29 now, so a solid decade's gone past. And sad to say, I've had more, like, assault experiences than better sexual experiences. But that's the joy of living in a country town where the majority of people don't know shit about shit, you know? Um, but I often think of that person, and I often think to myself, like, where are you now? What are you doing? This person must be in their late 50s. I wonder what they're still doing. I wonder if I'd recognize them if I saw them again. I wonder if they'd remember me. I don't know if they would. I don't know. Just like things you think of. And maybe one of the reasons why I think this conversation on like materials and texture and clothing and this kind of sensory feature factor in sex can actually be quite prominent because those are the things I recall about that sex experience a decade later. I may not necessarily remember his face, but I remember how all of those features made me feel, and it made me feel incredible. So there you go.
I was gonna bring up it as inspire. Where am I going with this? Okay, so I was gonna say um, not just the fabrics that you put on your body, but fabrics that can be like around your body. So like if you're a person that's having sex on the bed, satin sheets, silk
Oh,
sheets can
silk,
both feel amazing. Um,
silk sheets, girl. Come on.
Having sex on a leather couch can feel amazing. Um, yeah, that's all I got. Just
Oh, no,
satin, silk, leather. I mean, I can't think of any other like. I mean, obviously, you wouldn't want to like have sex on corduroy or something, but
no, but you know what? Sex on, or at least in my experience, was like heavily making out on like one of those like shag carpets with like a really long, soft, luxurious carpet. Just like, ooh, you just feel like you're fucking in furs. Like, I don't know, it was lush. And there was one time a guy fucked me on the cricket pitch. That was not fun because
that
that
doesn't sound like that would be fun.
no, that was like very short grass, and it was basically just my face getting mashed into the ground. It was not fun. No. Grass, not a recommended sex fabric.
No, mm-mm,
No, no.
or sand. Like everyone thinks
Or
having sex on the beach it sounds like a great idea until you realize that sand gets everywhere.
no, no, ma'am. And you know what? I think I've said this experience before, but like I remember being a kid, being driven to the beach by my parents, and taking off my thongs and like running across the hot burning sand and into the water. And by the time I made it to the water, I had gigantic blisters all over my feet.
Well, I mean, you'd want to have sex on like where the sand is wet, but then it's going to stick to you. So
Yeah, that just sounds a bit grotty. So here's a question for you. Where do you feel like your love of like fabric and texture came from? Do you feel like it's synonymous with that kind of gaining experience with your sexual self, or does it come from more of that exploratory side of you?
I mean, I have to go back to the leather community again. That's where it came from because that's where I was introduced to all these things. And so that was really what spawned. I mean, I suppose prior to that, I had, I've worn Lycra before. Um, but yeah, it wasn't until meeting leather people and putting it on and then experience like my friend that is into rope play is also very much into latex and he gave me a full bodysuit to wear one night and I went out dancing and just knowing there's something about the way that latex hugs you. It just becomes a second skin, and then peeling it off at the end of the night feels fucking amazing.
Yeah.
I can't describe it, but peeling it off of you after it's become that second skin, it's like It's a feeling I could just luxuriate in.
Nice. I mean, I love my Speedos that I've got just because of how it makes me feel with my weight gain, because I'm reaching a sort of size dynamic ratio with my body at least, where my fat pad is growing quite substantially. So now when I wear a pair of Speedos, it basically like smooths over everything. So there is no longer like definition between like my groin, my cock, my balls. It all just becomes like one beautifully soft mound. And that to me is such a sexy feeling. It's like, Christ, it really encapsulates just how much my fat is really taking over everything. And I love it. I think it's a very, very sexy look. And fat boys and budgie smugglers. It's fucking
And
hot.
as much as I love seeing that, I have to be honest, I don't enjoy wearing Speedos. I don't. And I don't want this to come off as arrogant or like me bragging, but
Oh, no, but you have a
honestly,
penis.
there's just not enough room.
There's not a... Ladies and gentlemen, Tim has. And I saw the outline on the cruise. I did. And I didn't want to tell Tim at the time, but I did measure it. And I did count at least 84 inches of human
Come
flesh.
on, no.
It did hang down to his knees. And I'm almost dead certain that if an elderly woman was walking past, he would take out her molars. I'm just saying, I think it would be considered an assault charge. I'm just saying, Tim, it's a weapon. It's a weapon
And
of...
that's what I was afraid of. I don't want to, like, no, that's obviously over exaggerating. But yeah, the point about I have yet to find a Speedo that has enough room in the pouch for what I've got.
Hmm. If there are any fetish wear designers out there that could make a pouch suitable for Tim's 84-inch penis, again, please write into at thiccradio@gmail.com. Tim, would very much love to hear from you. So, I want to ask you this. What do you feel like the gaming community shares in common with these communities that really focus on this love of like fabric and clothing?
I think gainers love Lycra, especially because of the way it hugs the curves, because of the way it can define the belly a bit more. Like, so if you think that your belly, and I don't know how to say this, like if you think it looks lumpy or if you think it looks a little asymmetrical, just throw a singlet on it. It will actually smooth it out completely. Like you will have just a solid ball. Same
Mm.
thing with latex. Leather, like I said, is not as forgiving. So unless you like the aesthetic of having your fat pouch out of different spots and look like it's sort of like oozing out of the stiff containment of the leather, like that's a look in itself, but that's not going to be as comfortable.
No. And I suppose like wrestling singlets, just 100% every gainer loves a wrestling singlet. Everyone's got a shot with their belly hanging out over the top. Um, I think some guys also love a harness. Crop tops, that's very gay. People love that. A lot of guys love a Speedo. Yeah, I think those are our, our kind of go-to typical pieces.
Well, I think gainers love singlets and because of the common like wrestler fetish. Like so wrestlers, if you're a heavyweight wrestler, you can be chubby, like they often will push a wrestler to put on weight in order to fit a certain category. And of course, there is that famous series of Warren Davis drawings involving a wrestler. So I think that's why it's such a common fetish among gainers.
Mm. Now, there's something that we should talk about is the influence Warren Davis and his Tom of Finland fascinations and inspirations have had over the gainer community. If Warren Davis and his artistic inspirations is the sort of progenitor of the gainer kink, our root really does come from a very classic leather man and a tight, hypermask leather inspiration. So that doesn't surprise me in the slightest. And I know that some of the most masculine images I find very, very sexy, and again, talking about specific outfits, uniforms. A man in uniform and just a big bellied man, in one of those uniforms where it's unbuttoned at the top and you can just see that curvature all the way down over the crest of the belly. It's barely holding it together. Leather belt, slacks, a nice pair of shoes, a cap on, like he's going to pin me down to the bed and rail the shit out of me. VV sexy. VV sexy. Though, I would say there is a difference with gainer fascination in that a lot of what gainers will love about clothing is the way we can make it pop, split, rip,
Hair.
tear, um, and that kind of fascination with how growth forces, the confine of this powerful, powerful fabric to basically give way to our immense bulk. Do you feel like that runs counter to maybe how some other, like, those fabric and item related communities find their focus with the items?
I mean, I suppose if you are into a fabric for its feeling or its aesthetic, you wouldn't want to destroy it because it's not always cheap to replace. But I'll raise my hand up and say that I fucking love to see a fat boy bursting out of his clothes, popping buttons, tearing seams. I think that's why I'm so into macro because this idea of like his fat cannot be contained.
Mm, very, very sexy. Um, I feel like the leather community is really the only one, and I know we listed quite a few fetishes and clothing styles, but like I don't think there's like a jockstrap community. You know what I mean?
There might be, honestly, we just
Uh,
haven't heard from it yet.
well, I suppose this is the question. Like, I think leather is the only one that I think I know of with any distinction is its own community. Could you argue that any of the others are sort of known to have their own communities?
Latex, definitely. It definitely has
Latex
its own
does.
community. Yeah, it even has its own convention in Chicago. I think it's in October.
There you go.
And
I
as
mean,
far as other fabrics specifically, I don't know. So do you think it's a stretch to say that furries are kind of a fabric community because they do make their costumes out of felt and
quite
other
possible.
materials that are escaping my brain for some reason?
I mean, this episode we're really focusing on fabric and clothing and
Yeah.
all of that. And I think furry definitely comes under that because realistically, pups rely on hoods a lot to get themselves into subspace, to get themselves into the puppy mindset. And, there's other accoutrement things. There's mitts to put on the hands and feet. There's, specific rope designs, to sort of bind the knees and the elbows to help them walk on all fours more effectively. You know, uh, and that creates more of an animalistic impression. And fursuits do the exact same thing. So I certainly think that's applicable. And I think it would actually be really interesting to do an episode on the intersection of gaining and furry because some of the most incredible like gainer art that I've seen intersects with furry.
Oh yeah, that's a big thing.
Yeah, yeah. And there's obviously links there to Vor and Pred as well. Again, macro micro. So I don't know. I think it'd be interesting to kind of explore that. Now, you mentioned that Lycra is going to be the most cost effective way of getting into, a specific fabricy fetish kind of a mode. But how would you best suggest, as someone who, as you say, invests in a lot of leather, what advice would you give to anyone who wants to start investing in pieces?
Of anything or of the more expensive stuff.
Well, of anything, but also the more expensive stuff. Like, what advice would you give?
I mean, if you want to get into any particular fabric and you're on an extreme budget, Lycra is going to be your best friend. And then when it comes to the more expensive stuff, I mean, so if you're going to get into leather, just like always research the quality and the company that you're buying from. Like one of the top companies for leather is Mr. S in San Francisco, and having purchased many of their items, I can vouch for their quality that it's very good. I've already pretty much told you everything you need to know about buying latex. And then, other fabrics, like if you want a kilt or you want something made out of mesh, you can find them for cheaper. You can even go on Wish. I have seen kilts being sold on Wish for like 15 bucks. I can't attest to the quality at all, but there are ways of doing it. And so maybe something doesn't look as great as it could. If it makes you happy, if it does what it needs to do for you, then you can always go the cheap route too. Um, yeah, just know the product, know the company, and take care of it. You know, like if you want it to last, you got to take care of it.
It's like a tattoo, really.
Mhm.
Tattoos and piercings. It's easy enough to say, oh, there's my local tattoo parlor. I'll just pop down there and get a little something done. And maybe if you don't care too much about the detailing, maybe for getting something simple and generic, maybe it doesn't really matter. But if you know that you've got a specific design in mind, research your tattoo artists. Don't presume that everyone can do everything the exact same. Like, you think about how many different types of hand drawing and painting artists there are out there. Tattoo artists are literally the exact same. They just work with needles and ink rather than like brushes and ink. And if you can think of how many different ways someone could artistically interpret your design, tattoo artists would be the same. Do your research, find someone who does what you want, and find reviews and do the thing. If you want to invest in that, do the right thing and find the right person who will do the thing for you. Plain and simple. And like you say, if you don't care too much about the specific quality, if you're just looking to get started, if you're looking just to have pieces to trial on, why not buy it from Wish? Why not buy it for cheap? And acknowledge in yourself, yeah, maybe this doesn't look the best, but I have an idea.
Yeah,
At
it
least
gives you
how
a
this.
nice like bedrock to start with.
Precisely. And I think, if we wanted to round this out, like for anyone listening who, just doesn't gel with the concept of, fabrics and, specific clothing items, what do you feel like you would want people like that to understand about your own attractions with stuff?
Well, it's just I like it for either its feeling or its aesthetic, and if it's not your bag, then it's just not your bag. Like you don't have to have an opinion about it. The only I will say one thing about certain aesthetics within these, fabrics and like subsets of the kink community, you have to be a little bit careful if you are into a really specific look. Like I'm going to reference someone that I knew that was looking for a replica of a World War II SS officer uniform in leather. And we all grabbed this kid and pulled him aside and said, don't do this. Don't ask about it. Don't be looking for it. Let it go. Even if you think that like that particular uniform would look hot on you or you thought it looked hot on somebody else, bad vibes, bad juju, don't go there. So be careful with that. But beyond that, I would say like if someone's giving you crap over liking a particular fabric, it's like, well, why do you wear denim? Why do you wear cotton? Why do you wear silk? Like it's all comes down to personal choice.
No, that makes sense. And to be fair, when you mentioned that, it tweaked in my brain immediately where I was like, oh no. Oh no. Because I think we've all, for those of us who like leather men and men who wear leather uniforms, I think we've all, in our deep dives, come across individuals who we find out have other paraphernalia,
Yeah,
let's say, that they might model off, and you go, huh? And then
yeah,
you have to do an about turn and GTFO that Instagram page because
yeah.
that's not on. So there's that element to it. But outside of the gauche,
I mean, if it doesn't seem like people would be okay with, I mean, and for very obvious reasons, then don't do it, It's very like it's obvious like your privilege is too out of control at that point.
yeah, it's like you already know why that wouldn't be cool, and it almost feels like for you to ask the question is less about asking for clarification on that stance in the community and more virtue signaling to people who might be in line with your probable viewpoints on the matter and just trying to, da 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 da. But anyways, that's its own
That's its own
conversation.
conversation. Yeah.
But Tim, do you think there's anything else on? Do you feel like there's anything else on the subject that we haven't really touched on?
I'm not sure what other fabrics we've forgotten.
Oh, I suppose things like technically diapers.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Diapers, again, would count as a form of. But you know what? We have a good reason not to talk about that because eventually we will do an episode on ABDL and we can explore diaper fetishism there. Otherwise, Google is more mentioning to me things like shoes, underwear, uniform, tight lacing, tight enclosures. Um,
Corsets. I mean, I don't know exactly what fabrics corsets are made out of, but I do know several men who like a corset.
Things like dog collars.
Oh,
So,
dog collars, yeah.
so technically metal to an extent. You know, people who get collared, people who get locked, combat
Chains.
boots, chains. Yeah, no, we pretty much cover the brand the gamut. Well done, us. Didn't really forget anything, it seems. But again, listeners, if you think we've missed anything, you can get in touch with us at thiccradio@gmail.com, and perhaps we'll have you on the show to revisit it with us. But that is it for another episode here on Thicc Radio. Please remember to like and subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and leave a good review. If you like this episode, the podcast, or just us in general, share it with your friends and encourage them to tune in. You can find me on Instagram at stannnum.
And you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok at ThiccMouse.
And people, you can also look us up on TikTok or our website at www.podpage.com/thick-radio. And as I said before, you can also reach us at thethickradio@gmail.com. So until next time, bye fats.
Bye fats.
Let's talk about it.
Thicc Radio is a Patreon and Enter app podcast produced by Stannnum and Thicc Mouse.
Mixed and mastered by stannnum.
Our artwork is provided by Lokitu.
Our theme song is provided by Spotify Cream.